You're listening to the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and it's time for this week's Long Island News, the show that talks to newsmakers and other important people from Nassau and Suffolk County that matter to Long Island and Long Islanders like you. So each week we'll have a conversation about issues that affect all of us. I live on Long Island just like you, and I want to know more about the people making the big decisions that affect all of us. So, Long Island's second recreational cannabis dispensary opened its doors back in December in East Farmingdale. It's called Happy Days Dispensary, and it's located on Route 109 near Republic Airport. And it is the second state-licensed brick-and-mortar recreational marijuana shop to open, and it went through a lot of legal hurdles to get those doors to swing open. And now that recreational marijuana is legalized, I know people are asking a lot of questions surrounding it. So today we thought we'd go straight to the expert to fill us in. My guest today is Paul Lepore, the president of Happy Day Dispensary. Welcome to this week's Long Island News.
Thank you for having me, Bill.
Thanks for spending the time. So let's start at the beginning. First off, tell us about yourself and how you ended up becoming the president of the second legalized recreational dispensary on Long Island.
Well, my background was originally business and finance, and I got into the pharmaceutical, nutraceutical, and cannabis consulting industry about 10, 12 years ago with the realization that it is going to become legal in New York at some point. I have always had a passion for the plant, grew my first plant very early on, even though it was illegal in full transparency. Mm-hmm. And, the medicinal uses that surround it, right, as, compared to other pharmaceutical drugs that have a lot of different side effects and things like that. But I am a big proponent on safe cannabis usage, right, really educating the masses on how to safely use cannabis, how to keep it out of the hands of children, right. Why to keep it out of the hands of children, how it can affect receptors and brain function, and just how it can differ from person to person on their specific metabolization rates and things like that. So ultimately we see this as an opportunity not just to create jobs and economic development, but also really as an opportunity to educate the masses, break some of the negative stigmatism around it, and make sure that it is being handled and utilized correctly with some of the education behind it that can be provided.
I think most people, and of course this is my knee-jerk, I'm not an expert in any of this, but I think most people had no clue of the mechanics and things that we're talking about here with just, and you went to school and learned all that nitty gritty, and now but trying to get people to understand some of these things.
Well, some people don't want to understand it. Other people do want to understand it. And then you have the group of individuals that, utilize it just to get high. Right. I mean, it's the reality behind it. It's no different than alcohol in that regard where, it's some people might have a nightcap to take an edge off. For example, my grandfather used to have a tablespoon of cognac every night just to help him have a good night's sleep, right?
Yep.
It doesn't mean you have to go out and, smoke an entire joint or live on your couch, right? Because you're not a productive member of society because you smoke quote unquote marijuana. Right. There's a lot of different products nowadays that focus on everything from microdosing and all the way through to if you wanted to sit on your couch and relax.
Right.
For example, we have over 700 different products in our store currently and are looking to expand that to closer to 1,200 by the end of January.
Well, so that includes like edibles,
concentrates, vapes, capsules, tinctures, chocolates. I mean, you name it. Flour, obviously, right? Pre-rolls.
I was just asking, what's a tincture?
A tincture is, in my opinion, the best form of usage for somebody who's trying to figure out how they metabolize cannabinoids, how their endocannabinoid system, or ECS, actually works and responds. It's linked to various receptors throughout the human body and basically works as a precursor to the central nervous system.
Right.
So somebody who's new to cannabis, and we've gotten this fairly often, even with no advertising, is people coming in and saying, I've never used cannabis before, taking, a lot of Xanax at night or Ambien just to go to sleep, or I'm dealing with various issues. And, we want to make sure that we provide them the right education and point them in the right direction, as opposed to walking into another store and somebody just hands them a 10 milligram gummy and says, yeah, here, try this.
Right.
They could have a very overactive ECS and only need 1 to 2 milligrams, right? So a tincture is an oil-based, typically, sometimes nano-encapsulated, water-based as well, and they're actually metabolized in different ways, which we can get into if you'd like to at some point. But it allows them to dose themselves out correctly and ease into it to find out how their body responds to cannabinoids. Right, and cannabis in general, because it does differ from person to person.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, the first evidence I've seen, and it was a videotape of epilepsy, and someone was beginning a seizure, and someone either blew the smoke in their face and it immediately subsided.
Yeah,
I said this first looking at it, I said this has got to be faked. It's just too amazing how quickly that happened. And then I come to find out, no, that's exactly what happened. How can you even, say anything against that when it has that kind of an effect on someone with a condition like that?
Yeah, look, the research has seen it with Parkinson's and other nervous system issues as well.
Well, are we still in a situation where the government has still kept cannabis as a Schedule I drug?
That is correct.
It's right up there next to heroin.
Yeah.
Does that mean that scientists or legal or, people wanting to be on the right side of everything, that they can't experiment with it and investigate it because it's...
They can. They need specific permits in order to do so. For example, there is... you had mentioned epilepsy, right? My mother-in-law happens to be epileptic and was taking about 16 pharmaceuticals on a daily basis. And about 10 years ago, I said, try this. It's CBD, it's hemp. And her response was, that's marijuana. I'm not going anywhere near it. Not going to happen. Fast forward to now, she's taking a quarter of the medications that she was previously taking and had less episodes and what they call auras. It's like a precursor, kind of like a signal that you might have a seizure.
Right?
Yeah.
Wow. There's the other thing is, we rely, whether we know it or not, we do rely on our pharmacists to tell us, you just bought a bag of $94 worth of drugs. So you got 5 things in here, and 2 of these you shouldn't take with the other 3 you have. We wouldn't know that. You got 4 different doctors, and they're giving you stuff and never asked you, what do you.
Yeah.
How does marijuana go into that mix? Are there many drugs that would be counter, that you shouldn't use it in conjunction with?
There could be, right? There could be various interactions with several drugs. One thing that I think most people should know is that if they're ingesting cannabis, so not through inhalation, but if they're ingesting a oil-based cannabis product, right? So not a water-soluble. That ends up getting metabolized typically through the liver and by the P450 enzymes in the liver. You should really not take, if you're relying on a specific pharmaceutical for a condition, you should not consume cannabis within 2 hours of that pharmaceutical because your body recognizes it as cannabinoids, and the P450 enzymes will choose to metabolize that over a pharmaceutical.
Okay.
Because all pharmaceuticals have to be repeatable in the exact same format, so they're all isolated compounds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go back to, now you became the president of what was the process like to get the license? I bet this was like daunting.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. It was early on, as soon as they released that I happened to qualify for a dispensary license, okay. Right? We didn't know if we were going to get it. Had no idea if we were going to get the license, but applied. Ended up getting it in April finally.
Okay.
We got the provisional license, and then had to submit another application showing where the location is and the rest of the documentation, standard operating procedures, things like that. Mm-hmm. And just a lot of waiting. I mean, I could say that I was aggravated with the delays of the state, but the reality is that they took on a huge undertaking mm-hmm. and are wildly understaffed and underfunded to take it on. So there were a lot of delays, and then dealing with the town as well. they were extremely helpful in the town of Babylon, but at the same time, a lot of hoops to jump through and things that I would say were fairly unnecessary.
Well, they had come out with one set of rules, and they even, I think it distributed some licenses, and then they wiped the slate clean and said, no, we're not going to do it that way, and they took 2 steps back. And some people that thought they were cleared to go found out they weren't. A lot of the vape stores, of course, because they were already situated, they're like, we're ready to just give us the stuff and we'll sell it. No, that's not going to happen. Yeah, it's a very tough thing. When you think about it.
It is. I mean, millions of dollars, just finding a location was probably one of the toughest things to do. I mean, I have friends in part of the Long Island Cannabis Coalition, and a lot of them have licenses, but they can't find a location, right? Because it's really only the town of Babylon, Brookhaven, Riverhead, and Southampton that opted in to allow for cannabis. Right. But
we've talked about this a couple of times on the show about most of the municipalities on Long Island opted out.
Yes,
and I I get to talk to most of the legislators and a lot of the politicians, and I thought as a political move, it's expedient. It's not stupid, because if you've opted out, that doesn't mean you can't opt in.
Yes.
But once you're in, you can't get out. So they're sitting back to see exactly what the numbers are going. Everybody's estimated how much money the state's going to make, and there've been some wild numbers. I kind of remember when that started in Colorado, that they made an estimate, and they blew that estimate right off. They made like 10 times what they estimated they were going to. And that, to me, knowing most municipalities and politicians, once they start to see those numbers, you're going to see a big slide into people deciding to get on the gravy train.
Yeah, well, we hope that's coupled with some good charitable organizations and making sure, because they are getting 3% back, right? So 3% back of all the sales is going back into the local municipality and the township. For example, the town of Babylon, we've had conversations with them. I've spoken with Beacon Family Wellness, which is, focuses on addiction, and wanted to come up with some mental health and at-risk youth programs with them. So not only can some of these programs and social and economic programs be bolstered by this? But if you have the right operators in your township that really want to give back to the community, you're only amplifying that.
Right.
So,
that's great. Yeah. You're listening to this week's Long Island News on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and my guest today is Paul Lepore, the president of Happy Days Dispensary of Farmingdale, the second state-licensed brick-and-mortar recreational marijuana shop to open here on Long Island. There's so many. I mean, I can think of a million things. I grew up on Long Island, so I've been here a long time. This is like the impossible thing that happened. Oh, my God. But you're right. There's so much misinformation and people's impressions and bad news coverage for 1,000 years. This was the biggest. I always felt like this was a cat and mouse game between law enforcement and the citizenry, and what a waste of time.
Yeah,
what a waste of time. I know people that have quit alcohol, which is one of the worst addictions there is, using marijuana.
Yeah.
It may only, people say, well, that's just a replacement one. I said, yeah, but you know what? When he gets in a state like this, he's sitting home on his couch watching TV. Yeah. He's pretty docile, and he's not going to be a problem for you, out on the roads, none of that stuff.
And how many people have died from marijuana, and how many people have died from alcoholism?
I love the Senate. I watched the Senate.
The numbers
hearing.
Are there.
I watched the Senate hearing with the guy from the DEA, and they went down the list of drugs and how many deaths from opioids. 800,000. Yeah. And they got to the bottom of the list and said how many deaths from marijuana. And he put his head in his lap, kind of just looked down and he said, none.
Yeah.
And we can't hear you, Senator. He said none. And they said exactly that. Then what are we doing here?
Yeah. From the government perspective, I mean, they have a lot of work to do just to legalize it or deschedule it as a Schedule I drug. I mean, in the passing of the Farm Bill, right, to legalize hemp, there was no quality control for a long time in a lot of places. I have seen videos of people making CBD gummies in barns right next to their pigs, right? So there's no good manufacturing practices, requirements, things like that. I think really what they're trying to figure out, even if they wanted to legalize it tomorrow, is how does the FDA create a program similar to the OTC or over-the-counter program where you have to be licensed and inspected by the FDA in order to produce marijuana products, and also the taxing structure, right? Mm-hmm. How do they prevent the legalization of it and then everybody just popping up shops all over the place? There's a lot of work and a lot of regulatory requirements that are going to go into it to make it a safe environment for consumers, right? So understanding that, I understand why it's not just, flipping a switch, but
well, the comparisons, I think of there's a joke going around, it's a meme, and it's a doctor looking at, I don't know, an audience, and he just looks at his friend and says, they think there's still food in our food.
Oh yeah.
We have ingredients that are GRAS. Generally regarded as safe. Now, isn't that comforting to know that you're going to eat a product? And that's one of the things that are, they talk about the old rule of thumb, and that's if you can't cover the ingredients of something you're eating, when you pick up the package, if you can't cover the ingredients with your thumb, you probably shouldn't eat it. Yeah. If there's words in there you can't say, hexamexamychlorophene, you probably shouldn't be eating things like that. Yeah. I want to see the ingredient, in my water, I want to see ingredients. Water.
Yeah, maybe minerals. That's about,
okay. But
yes.
It's horrible. People come here from Europe and eat some of the food, and they just can't believe that.
There's a lot of stuff that's illegal in Europe that is sold here on a daily basis, and some of the largest moving products, everything from cheese products and dairy products all the way through to snacks and sweets, and we're lacking in that regard, and to your point, food isn't food anymore.
And I really bring that up only because this same organization that's policing the food is going to police the marijuana, and that's not to say they're going to do a bad job of it. I think it's high up in notoriety, so they're probably going to be a little more, rigorous with their stuff about marijuana. But here, meanwhile, we're eating tons of the food that they let get by. Nobody said, it was terrible to find out that you're allowed so many rat hairs in a thing of cupcakes or something, Not
cereal.
None.
A lot of stuff in cereal.
There was not none.
Yeah.
There's, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
But in any event, so, all right, so let's get back to I go off in the tulips all the time. I understand now you have some legal hurdles to get the store open, and you find, how long did it actually take you to open from the time you got your location?
Well, so let's see, April to January, right? So we're talking about 10 months,
right?
Just about.
And now
that was after getting the license, right? That was after getting the approval. If we go back to July 14th of last year, that's when it really started. But even further back was preparing for this day, was preparing over the past 10 to 12 years for the legalization of cannabis, knowing it was going to happen in New York at some point and not knowing how it was going to be released, not knowing if it was going to be vertical integration, if it was going to be, you can only have one license, you could have 3 licenses. If you asked me 5 years ago if I ever thought I'd have a retail store, I would have said no. Right. I would have said I would be on the production side. But the reality is I can do a lot of education and a lot of good, which is what the community and general population really needs.
Yeah.
And I can do more of that from the point of educating on the store level to the consumers because I'm front facing in retail.
Right.
So it was a good decision. I'm happy with it. And I think we could do a lot of substantial change and have a lot of positive impact in the community overall.
Yeah. I just think for, a medical thing, it's, as more people get used to it or realize that they can use it, some people think it's a miracle. It's not like your arm is falling off from an infection. No, if you smoke a joint, that's not going to fix that.
No.
But there are things that people wouldn't associate, just regular aches and pains. They wouldn't realize, and it's great that you have the knowledge you do. People ask you a question, you actually know. Well, you're not the kid next door who just happens to have been smoking for 10 years.
No,
right?
definitely not.
Yeah.
And to your point, there's a lot of negative stigmatism and that still exists around cannabis, and a lot of it is from the lack of education. So we're I think as a community, everybody's looking to do their part to help with that. You know, but the first guy who opened a liquor store after Prohibition was called a heathen.
Of course,
right? This is no different. Where
a pendulum swings slow sometimes. Yeah. What I thought was interesting, I've been to the other dispensary, and looking around the room, I realized it was all people my age.
Yes. Yeah.
This wasn't the thing that kids were, it's not like the newest rock band on the block. It's, I looked around it. It was a lot of gray hair and a lot of couples and people that I spoke to did mention a specific thing that they were there for. One lady had terrible back problems and more than one couldn't sleep. That was a big one.
That's a huge one. Yeah.
Yeah. And they swore by it. And one lady said, I as a kid, I could never stand smoking it, and I couldn't stand the smell of it. And I come in here and I get this little gummy that, they finally showed me which one would be the best. And she said, and it works like a charm. So, yeah, and those are the stories that I listen to and go, well, you can't argue with that.
You can't.
It's not a commercial. This is some lady's life, and it's, working for her.
Yeah.
And we just spoke about this. There was a quote in Newsday about you planning to donate a percentage of the proceeds to town programs for mental health.
Yes.
That's big. That's really big. You don't hear a lot at any kind of businesses. You don't hear that kind of thing. You hear them pop up when there's an event or a thing that's going to help, and then they're gone again. If this is an ongoing thing, you could be actually talking about a lot of money.
Yeah, and that's the hope. This isn't a publicity stunt. This isn't a PR kick. Over the past 10 years, I've provided 39 kids with heart surgery, instead of taking bonuses at the end of the year. And trust me, I could use them. Right. Family and kids and, people that depend on me. And but it's the right thing to do, right? I always tell people I don't need to go out and buy a Ferrari. I don't need to be wealthy. I don't need to be flashy. If I can help to create a better world so that by the time my kids grow up, it's not like Mad Max times. Well, then this was my path. This is, we're all put on this earth to leave it in a better condition than when we entered it, right? And if we're not doing that, then what are we really doing? What is life really all about? So that's something I'm very passionate about. And my partners as well. They raised millions of dollars for cancer research.
Well, hopefully in your drive to spread awareness about cannabis, you are also spreading that kind of awareness. I think you are. You got that.
Yeah. I think if we do it and we set the standard and the example, hopefully others will follow.
Yeah.
That's the hope.
But, you're the exception, though. I'll say that to the listening audience. This is the exception. A business that's actually, you are giving back, and that could really turn out to be a whole lot of money. Now, what trends do you anticipate shaping the future of this recreational market?
I think as more stores open up, I think as more education is provided, you're going to see it become more like alcohol, right? As I said earlier, I think that the main thing is really promoting the education for people who are not familiar with cannabis, that it's not like you just take this and go drive around or operate machinery, right? There is safe consumption and safe handling that needs to be considered, but there's constantly new products coming out. We're talking about hundreds of different cannabinoids that are present in this plant that can be pheno-hunted through genetics to make them more prevalent. All cannabinoids start off in a plant as CBG or cannabigerol. And depending on the genetics of the plant and how it's cultivated, different stress levels, they can be manipulated to produce more or less of a specific cannabinoid. I'll give you an example. THCV is being studied and has been being studied for a while. It helps with appetite suppression and can also be a good replacement for Adderall, believe it or not. It's non-intoxicating. Right. It's non-psychoactive. CBG, cannabigerol, that I was just mentioning, I've even done some research over the years with that and lion's mane mushrooms, right? And NAD to help possibly create more brain cells, right? And help the regeneration of brain cells. So there's a lot of different uses. I think you're going to see a lot of that in the pharmaceutical end of things. I know that if there's any pharmaceutical companies listening, they're probably like, yeah, we're already working on it.
Right.
You know, they're not stupid. They know that it's coming at some point, and they have their own ideas of things.
You're the guy to ask now. I've always thought for a long time there are receptors in the human body that are called cannabinoid receptors.
Yes.
And then you got a plant that's called cannabis.
Yep.
Do you think these two organisms kind of grew up together?
Well, they definitely work synergistically. You know, the different cannabinoids will work as agonists or antagonists or even bind to specific receptors. There was a study that was done out west during COVID, and very early on, you know, knowing this, I said there has to be a cannabinoid mixture that can actually bind or work as an agonist or antagonist to the ACE2 receptors, because that's where SARS-CoV-2, the viral strain of COVID, was replicating and causing that cytokine storm. So if you prevent that and block it, right, you're actually neutralizing and preventing it from replicating in the human body. So it happened to be the two acidic forms that this study had showcased, where it was CBDA and CBGA, right? So the non-decarboxylated or non-heated forms of CBG and CBD that actually worked to help to reduce that. So tons of different uses.
I think you need your own laboratory.
Well, that was the thought originally. Like I said, 5 years ago, I thought I would be in a lab somewhere and doing this, but, you know.
Well, all right. I mean, I still have a bunch of questions. We could talk for a long time, I'm sure. But we are going to eventually run out of time. What would you like people to know?
I mean, look, if you're a cannabis consumer, or if you're not a cannabis consumer and just want to learn more, we have a higher education room. We're very education focused. We're located at 105 Route 109 in Farmingdale. Our phone number is 516-888-1505. And you can always place an order, look at our menu. We have 700 products currently and looking to expand that to over 1,200 in the near future. And, you know, you can go right on the website, look at our menu, place a pre-order. The website is Happy, Happy, Days, Days, so the traditional spelling.
Right.
And then LI, like Long Island. So happydaysli.com.
Okay. And there's like educational stuff on there too?
There's educational from the product standpoint. There's more coming. It's not our final website right now. Hopefully by Monday.
Okay, but it's good that people know where that, you know, I just don't want them calling your number and engaging you in a half an hour conversation about, you know.
I'm happy to do it. You know, that's why I'm there. That's why I look like I haven't slept in 3 months, because I haven't, right?
I mean, it's cool that, you know, I mean, normally you go to any of the places and you're just dealing with somebody standing behind a cash register. So they know about it as much as anybody behind a cash register knows.
Yeah.
And, you know, it can be disconcerting. Your volumes of, you know, on the subject, and people need to know that stuff. They really do.
And our staff is very receptive to it, and a lot of them are already very knowledgeable. So adding this additional knowledge, you know, to their repertoire and being able to help people is what we look to do.
Right.
We want everybody to be able to provide educational services.
My guest today has been Paul Lepore, the president of Happy Days Dispensary of Farmingdale, a second state licensed brick-and-mortar recreational marijuana shop to open here on Long Island. And we definitely want to thank you for taking the time to be here today to speak with us. And definitely good luck with the business. And I'll see you up there sometime. Are you usually in the place?
Yeah, I'm basically sleeping there at this point. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. All right. Well, the clock on the wall says it's time for this week's Long Island News to get on out of here. I'm Bill McIntyre. Remember, you can listen to us by searching for this week's Long Island News wherever you listen to podcasts. And we're right here on the radio every Friday at 3 p.m. on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.